Nigel here. I will briefly break the rules and put my camera on so you can all see who I am. Hi. So I am an account director at Livingstone. Specifically, I've been working with BT for a number of years around the area of software asset management. And we developed a really good partnership with them, and we were very pleased to be invited to participate in Innovation Martlesham and be able to collaborate with the various organizations and people on the phone. So we're really looking forward to that. And this is our first webinar, hopefully the first of many. And obviously, hopefully the next one will be in person, we hope. So Chris, you want to pop on to the next slide? Before we kicked off, we thought it would just be useful, again, this is in no way a sort of sales presentation. For those of you who don't know us or don't know much about the area of software asset management or software license management, we thought we'd just give you a quick 2 minutes in terms of...
Yes, I just need to set this recording.
Oh, yeah. Just a quick 2 minutes in terms of who we are and what we do as an organization. So in short, those of you who don't know what software asset management is, it's effectively the management of software license usage and procurement in an organization. And there are roughly, at a very high level, 2 major outcomes that organizations are looking for. Saving money against their software spends and ensuring that they're compliant. So compliance is a big issue in software licensing. Organizations can very quickly become non-compliant and be susceptible to audit. The Livingstone Managed Service is designed on a regular basis to optimize a customer's software licenses, ensuring that they're buying the right amount against the right contracts and they remain compliant. And we do this through a series of subject matter experts. When you see vendor focus, people involved in the industry will know that Oracle licensing is very different to IBM licensing, which is completely different to Microsoft licensing. There are dedicated specialists in each area. And as you can see, our focus is on the weird and the wonderful, the large and complex. BT are in good company in terms of some very large institutions that we service, because of course, the larger you are, the bigger the problem of audits is, the bigger the problem of overspend is. The sort of final point before I pass on to Chris, who's going to focus on some of the major trends that are going on in the industry at the moment. What makes us unique is our independence. So a lot of organizations who deliver SAM are actually also involved in the sale of software licensing. Livingstone kind of work exclusively to help customers save money and remain compliant. So that's it in terms of who we are, how we came to be, and why we're here. What we want to focus on today is more looking at current challenges with software licensing, specifically around cloud and subscription models, and some of the challenges and opportunities that brings. So I'm going to stop talking at this point and pass on to Chris Goff, who is our Chief Strategy Officer here at Livingstone. So Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Nigel. So good morning, everyone. Yes, Chris Goff, Chief Strategy Officer of the Livingstone Group. So thanks for giving us your time this morning. And hopefully at the end of this session, we'll have kind of given you a quick tour, I think, of the current dynamics of the current software and cloud landscape, and certainly reflecting on 2020 year to date, and really the lead up to that, and importantly, what good looks like in terms of helping customers stay on top of managing cloud consumption, and also the elements of software lifecycle and compliance. So let me just really start just by, I think, just bring this up to date on I think where we think things are, both in terms of the dynamics of software and cloud and the industry, and general, I guess, external factors so far. 2020, I think, I wouldn't describe it a year of change, but I would describe it a year of accelerating change, and there's a number of factors that sit behind that. Clearly, a lot of organisations have already had fairly long-term plans around digitising their businesses in reaction to the industries and technologies that are available, and AI being a great example. Clearly, where the current world events of 2020 have accelerated things is the need to support new engagement models or improved engagement models based on a changing client, supplier, and employee relationship. And so it's absolutely clear that whilst certain parts of global industry have been affected by things such as COVID, the acceleration of investment in market digitization and technologies such as AI has carried on regardless and accelerated. Having speaking to a number of partners that we work with who are either resellers or system integrators and our customers, clearly spend this year has not reduced, and in fact has accelerated in many of these areas as you quite might expect. And consequently, IT itself is also evolving its approach to the delivery of service, and certainly for many organisations, and certainly large enterprise organisations, IT is moving in itself as an internal shared service into a service provider type function. The move to buying cloud services and also subscription type SaaS models means that a lot of IT functions are now spending more of their time, rather than integrating technology, but are spending their time integrating service. And consequently, a lot of the management process and workflow has driven huge increases in things like IT automation delivered by cloud type platforms. And you only have to look at the acceleration of companies such as ServiceNow in terms of that adoption and the rate of growth that they are continuing to see even this year, despite the world events that are going on. And of course, lastly, there's the change to an enforced business and general organisational practice. Needless to say that a lot of organisations leading up to the rise of clearly the COVID situation had very well defined business continuity process, really focusing on the continuation and the continuity of primarily IT delivery and service delivery into a fairly continuous footprint of delivery. What COVID has done is changed that. So many business practices have changed almost out of recognition because of obviously of the impact of social distancing and the need to support working from home. And of course, that in itself has resulted in a lot of organisations rapidly acquiring technology to facilitate that. And a lot of those decisions have been driven not by strategically from central IT, but by business leaders, budget holders, functional owners, where they quickly had to establish a means of doing business in a quickly disrupting environment. And the underlying message, of course, is that cloud is the enabler to all three of those things. 10 years ago, given that challenge that we faced this year, 10 years ago, the ability for both business and IT to respond to that would have been far less rapid, far less agile, and far more disruptive. And so cloud has thankfully enabled a lot of organizations, whilst they have been massively impacted, to continue with their longer term strategy of digitization, but more rapidly respond to the 2020 scenario. So just dropping into the aspects of what that means, clearly we are moving into a consumption-driven IT arena, and have been for some time. And there are a number of factors that are driving that. The first and primary one, really, in many cases, has been demand. Demand in terms of being able to meet scale and transformation requirements, demand from business users to be able to use more of the technology that's become available, and as it's now accessible as a service rather than as a technology project, it's clearly far easier for both business units and users to take advantage of that. And you only have to look at your own Office. If you're all Office 365 users, and if you go into the Office portal, you'll have noticed over the last few years the number of applications that are being added to that portal almost on a monthly or quarterly basis. What's also interesting is, of course, is that approach to delivering a whole portfolio of applications direct to users means that users are now more empowered to demand services or functions that perhaps our organization currently doesn't access to. If, in our own organization, an interesting transformative aspect of availability of technology through portals such as Office 365 is users asking, can we use Power Apps, Power BI, things that may not be covered under existing subscriptions, but users are now directly recognizing where technology is specific to them, and are asking businesses directly for them if they can start buying it to use it and consume it as part of their productivity working day. And clearly, what this results in is a major move from CapEx to OpEx. We all know that historically IT projects have been generally funded by CapEx, and depending on the revenue model of the organization, the impact of CapEx has a massive impact on when and how an organization invests in new infrastructure and new technology and new applications. So the move to consumption and subscription means that whole dynamic changes quite markedly. And of course, certainly in this year, OpEx has been a massive challenge for organizations, as the trading environment has clearly been affected very negatively. So being able to apportion IT investment versus revenue or productivity benefit is becoming quite difficult, because even now you're buying contracts with a 2 or 3 year commitment of consumption, but your changing OpEx line may not necessarily help you drive efficiency and make best use of that investment over that period. And a whole raft of customers are clearly, before this year came, have set investment budgets on an expected amount of consumption, only to see that being very different this year in various different areas. And of course, that also has an impact if you're delivering IT as a service, because a lot of the people now who yield a lot of the spend power are no longer necessarily IT people. 36, there's a Gartner stat there, which is 36% of formal IT spend is no longer IT led, but business led. So budget holders are clearly in more control of how they spend their money, and as the marketplace is driven by service rather than technical application or function, so they are in a far better position to judge whether they feel a technology investment has a direct benefit to their their organization, whatever that does. And you know, from our perspective, we're seeing that increase more and more. And of course, the means to also spend money on IT is also changing through the development of platforms such as marketplaces. So obviously, you know, if you're a major cloud provider and are able to harness marketplace platforms for your customers, it enables them to make more in the moment spend decisions on product or service adoption. And of course, that creates another layer of complexity and challenge if, from a centrally managed perspective, you're trying to implement any kind of policy or standardization. And so ultimately, IT cannot control all spend. And certainly we're seeing more and more with customers that we work with as budget holders take more decisions and in some cases implementing services. And we all know probably in COVID where, you know, budget holders have just bought technology just to maintain continuity of business or operation. Clearly, this is quite a major challenge. So that clearly has an impact, and certainly when you look at the relationship of investment to output, OPEX control becomes a far harder proposition to deal with. And there's one other aspect to it as well, is that a lot of organisations are trying to reduce dependency on fewer suppliers for service because they clearly believe there's an opportunity to take better charge of market dynamics, on the belief, of course, that the quality of service is, in terms of cloud services, is becoming less differentiated. But of course, what we do know is that regardless of who you buy that from, many of those core cloud services are operated actually almost by, certainly in the major infrastructure realm and platform as a service, by fewer and fewer major service providers. And so, you know, and certainly if you're a customer who's buying their office productivity applications, cloud services applications, you may also be using ERP cloud services from the same vendor. Suddenly, your ability to have freedom of strategic choice on where you move and how you move and what you do with that, it commercially becomes potentially more constrained than you may realize. And certainly the market is recognizing that being all in with investment requires a far more proactive approach to controlling how you manage that vendor relationship and how you are able to hold them accountable for the quality of service and the value that you receive from those investments. And with that also is a changing aspect of audit. And if you look at the year-to-date last quarter performance for a lot of the major, I would say, tier one vendors in the marketplace, you're seeing a very interesting picture to emerge. So if I look at almost what I would call cloud exclusive providers such as Salesforce.com or ServiceNow, their year-to-date growth is pretty much aligned at about 30% year on year, with hardly any disruption at all from COVID. If you look at Microsoft, their quarter-on-quarter consumption of client consumption of Azure is about 40%, 47%, I think, in Q3. That's quarter-on-quarter. It's quite startling. Microsoft overall in the last 12 months has grown about 12%. If you, however, look at Oracle, IBM, and SAP, Oracle is trading at about 2% over revenue 12 months to date. IBM is 2.5% down. They're in their third quarter of revenue decline, and SAP is 4% down on this year. And what's really interesting there, of course, is that the market for SAP quite strongly a 23% share devaluation only a week or so ago. So the market is looking at providers and going, are you evolving your customers? And for those that aren't, they have very few choices available to them if they're not organically moving their customers to their cloud platform. So things like audit risk becomes a real tool for them to maintain commercial control of their customers. And we are seeing this today in a lot of the engagements we're now doing, where certain vendors are using this heavily to maintain that commercial control. And of course, as we expand our portfolio of service, and certainly this year, where a lot of niche providers have suddenly been seeing themselves growing spectacularly because of the offering that helped customers mitigate the impact of COVID. So other challenges such as governance and security start to become a more longer term issue for customers. Clearly, I think the saying is buy in haste, relent at leisure. And certainly in some instances where contracts have been signed quite rapidly, the full due diligence of technology has not been available. So customers are now grappling with how do we get our arms back in control of where we are and make sure that we've not created problems that could really, from a regulatory perspective or anything else, really affect us in the future. So the bottom line is risk complexity has increased massively. So what does this mean tangibly to customers? Customers are coming up against what we describe as the consumption challenge. And it's interesting to see what's happening. And certainly, this is not something that's just appeared this year. It's actually been going on now for 3 or 4 years, but this year it's particularly accelerated. And so you're seeing customers clearly ramping up consumption of cloud services, and certainly if they're platforms like IaaS, there's also an implicated licensing increase. Certainly, if you're not optimizing some of the license contract benefits that some of the providers provide, and customers are seeing consumption of both increase massively. And typically, what happens is, customers will, suddenly they'll realise that their overage, as it's called, their overspend of cloud is because it's not being managed, and they typically put some focus on it. Normally starts from a dev test perspective, but clearly, as customers roll out cloud-based solutions, so they're realizing that costs are accelerating well beyond forecasts, and so they implement a savings project to try and bring it back under control. And that succeeds, but what we actually see is that regardless of that point in time focus, spend starts to increase again, and it kind of linearly increases without having the right level of control around it. So what customers think they're going to spend still is underestimated, and so over time that consumption line kind of returns to its kind of peak area. And the other dynamic to think about this is also when you've got vendors who have been some of you've been some of their biggest customers, suddenly you're spending your money elsewhere. They realize that they can see this transformation's happening. They kind of start to see your uptake of it, realize it's impacting their own revenue, and start employing tactics to try and bring this back under their control commercially. So we're seeing, this is where we see typically audits. And of course, the challenge for you is it's at your peak of consumption is when you get audited, and the bar set there clearly defines that level of consumption as being the ongoing settlement moving forwards. It's very expensive. So what we focus on with customers, and customers tend to do, is to focus on 2 things. The first thing is, how do we upfront optimize? How do we bring that well below what it's ended up getting to? Importantly, avoiding the risks of unfettered consumption and audit. And lastly, how do we maintain optimization on an ongoing basis, ensuring that consumption is forecasted, accounted for, and continually managed. And underneath, you can clearly see some of those factors there that influence that. So the cloud and software and cloud governance model. Clearly, the challenge for managing both software and cloud, and certainly, and again, this year has been really interesting, is it's proven, for those people trying to control and manage and put governance around this, that enterprise visibility is absolutely key. And of course, one of the things, or one of the impacts of COVID is you're now dealing with workforces that are dispersed and scattered everywhere, and clearly, people are unable to perhaps collaborate quite the same as they were, and so, from a visibility perspective, it's had quite a major impact. Customers, not just knowledge of their own systems they manage, but also the second-hand information that helps customers get a general collective view of what's going on in their organization. And those kind of 5 examples there are just 5 key data points that if you're going to put any kind of model together, you have to be able to capture those and pull those together. And of course, the outcomes we're trying to achieve are quite interesting. So for customers where they've implemented software and cloud governance successfully, we're seeing some really interesting results. In terms of things like contract optimization, where we are able to optimize a contract before consumption curve starts, for some we're seeing some amazing results, up to about 38 or 40% cost reduction from the modeling that the vendors provided and the cost base through to what we were actually able to contract for. And a lot of that is because a lot of the forward forecasting is based on assumption. An assumption equals risk, and risk equals cost. And so a lot of the work that we're seeing customers do where this successfully drives out these costs is getting to the bottom of truth and validating and what things look like. The other thing also is by looking at how you're planning to account for it moving forwards, you're suddenly in a position where you're actually asking the financial questions and looking at the financial processes to make the organization more accountable for its consumption. And that alone, once you start asking people hard questions and testing perhaps parts of a budget holder's team who's perhaps not really got a grasp of costs or whether their justification is right or not, also leads to quite an interesting reduction overall operationally in cost. And the need for mitigation of compliance and security risk is certainly really important. From a compliance perspective, a proactive approach to understanding the models of legacy licensing and how that will be used in that transformed environment is absolutely key. And understanding whether the contracts you bought it under historically, if they provide the agility for use in that environment in the way you want to consume it, is also important. And we're finding there that we're able on the compliance side to mitigate in excess of 90% with customers. Clearly, there are things that even they can't control, technical mistakes and things, but a lot of the governance we help put around that really makes a massive difference to their risk management. Associated with that, of course, is when we do a lot of work in terms of with customers around software and software versioning and things, we also are able to help customers better assess things like security risk as well, when they're looking at whether legacy software perhaps has had no legacy maintenance for a number of years, that kind of stuff, what their entitlement to is in terms of security fixes. All those things also help them manage that as they go through transformation. Demand is then something we help customers with. So governance should all be looking not just at the trustworthy data that sits around what we're doing with the organisation, but also our ability to integrate lifecycle and process. And so putting that process architecture, again, also standardizes and reduces costs, putting the right gates of authorization, spend limit, standardizing things like catalogs, all help manage cost. And lastly, and actually it's a really important point, for a lot of organizations, they've made a massive inroads to, or they think successfully in terms of negotiation, because they've been going through a massive transformation. So I'm going to stop buying this product and we're now going to buy this product. But in a couple of years, we're expecting that to kind of that curve to kind of flatten a bit. And so those points of negotiation, new product adoption, are going to lessen. And so it's important that customers now have a investment value strategy for governance when it comes to addressing value, because your leverage for negotiation becomes far less when you're not necessarily buying lots of net new product. And so understanding what good looks like in terms of service value. Bear in mind, a lot of people who are managing cloud contracts and in the past managed licensing, you're now buying services, not product. So those KPIs suddenly become very important and become essential to both assessing value, but also ensuring that the basic service levels of your service have been met. And so we have a model that sits in this, and it's based on the ISO 19770 standard, which looks at software and cloud governance, and in 3 tiers: so trustworthy data, lifecycle process, and optimization. And the trustworthy data level, we're looking at how we pull that enterprise visibility into understanding our consumption and understanding our business trends around that consumption, and also our ability to measure compliance and the insights that asset data gives us to any other factors of organizational activity. Integrated lifecycle process, so our ability to both manage the lifecycle of those cloud or software services in their commercial contract journey, and also ensure on the other side that technically and operationally we are minimizing wastage and fully rationalized through that journey. And lastly, but the most important, that we can understand how the business wants to consume cloud and software, and ensure that we have the ability to first and foremost negotiate and optimize contract, but then operationally manage cost and optimize our billing. And that is as much about making the organization as accountable for what they consume, as well as ensuring that what you're getting charged is contractually compliant and meets with the agreed commercial terms that you negotiated. So how do we help customers through this? I beg your pardon. There's underneath that, there's a whole area of, I guess, competency facets that are all part of or being able to build that target operating model. So it's having the visibility of what you're using and the contractual entitlement, our ability to track and trend the financial aspects of what's being bought and what's being consumed, those assets being managed through process policy and being reported, our ability to align expertise, our ability to strategic review with the business and make sure that we're capturing, I guess, the evolution of product strategy and ensuring that the commercial story is maintained and understood. And lastly, supporting and having the ability to support the ongoing vendor management. So what we have at Livingstone is a 5-step ITAM governance plan that we provide customers, and this is something that you can take away. We have it published. It's something you can use yourselves. What we find is customers will take this, they'll take it back, they'll cogitate on it, they'll go, right, how am I going to do this? It gives a great plan to do this, but where we then tend to get asked to be involved is really in the facilitation of this, and just helping customers translate what's happening in their environment into that governance plan. And so we produced this about a year ago. We're actually going through a second edition, but this is available on our website. Download it and make use of it. Keep posted for updates, and any questions on this, please do come and talk to us. So in summary, this is a blueprint really for minimizing cost, maintaining control, mitigating risk, and measuring value. It's supported by the target operating model around software and cloud governance, and we've produced a blueprint to help you achieve some of this. And importantly, the commercial benefits, and because all of this has to be grounded in commercial reality, the benefits of doing this are quite stark. And you know, I would say to anyone who's grappling with this challenge, you know, please do have a look at this. And if you want some further briefing or guidance from us, we're more than happy to help. So I think I'm about 5 minutes from our allotted time. I think probably now is a good time to kind of stop there. So there are contact details. Please make a note of those for myself and Nigel.